There is a particular kind of silence that follows an unexpected question. Someone who has spoken fluently for the last 20 minutes, confident, composed, seemingly certain of every opinion they hold, suddenly pauses, just slightly too long, when asked something they never rehearsed an answer for. You notice it before you can name it. Something in the rhythm breaks, just for a moment, and in that moment, you glimpse something the rest of the conversation had carefully kept hidden. Why does one simple question sometimes reveal more than an hour of confident conversation? Why does hesitation, of all things, feel more honest than certainty? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel, where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Picture a mask so finely made that it can produce almost any expression on command: delight, sympathy, interest, warmth, exactly when each is required. A skilled mask can hold nearly any conversation without slipping. But every mask has a seam, some place it was never quite designed to bend, and pressed there, even briefly. Something underneath is forced, for just a moment, into view. Is that moment a flaw in the mask? Or is it the one place worth looking closely? Carl Jung believed that the persona, the self we present to the world, is remarkably well rehearsed, built through years of small adjustments made to be liked, accepted, and understood. Most conversation moves entirely within its boundaries, comfortable and low risk. But what if there exists one particular kind of question, ordinary enough to seem harmless, that the persona was never actually built to answer, because it does not ask what someone thinks, but who they actually are underneath what they think? Here is the question worth asking, quietly, the next time you want to understand someone beyond their rehearsed self. Not what do you want, but what would you do if you knew you could not fail? Not a question about achievement, a question about desire, stripped of the fear that normally shapes every answer people give about themselves. Why does this particular question so often produce a pause rather than an immediate answer? Because most people have spent years answering a slightly different question, without realizing it, not what do I want, but what is safe enough to want, what is realistic enough to say aloud, what will not risk disappointment or ridicule if it goes unmet. Remove the fear of failure from the question entirely, and suddenly the persona has nothing prepared to offer. Consider what tends to surface in that pause. Sometimes a long-buried ambition, spoken almost apologetically, as though it was something faintly embarrassing to still want. Sometimes an admission that a person has structured their entire life around avoiding a particular kind of disappointment, rather than pursuing any clear desire at all. Sometimes, most tellingly, no answer arrives at all, only a long, uncomfortable silence. Because the question requires an intimacy with one's own wanting that many people have simply never practiced. Alfred Adler believed that much of human behavior is organized around avoiding a deep, often unconscious sense of inferiority, and that many of our stated goals are quietly shaped less by desire and more by the fear of failing publicly at something that mattered. Is the hesitation you witness in that pause simply thoughtfulness? Or is it the sound of someone encountering, perhaps for the first time in years, a version of themselves they had stopped consulting? But here is the harder question to turn back on yourself. What happens in you when you are asked this same question honestly? Does an answer arrive quickly, confidently, already rehearsed? Or does something in you also pause, uncertain, searching for a version of wanting you have not allowed yourself to examine in some time? Jung believed that the shadow, the parts of ourselves left unexamined, often contains not only what we consider shameful, but also what we consider impossible, unrealistic, embarrassingly large to admit wanting. A desire denied long enough does not disappear. It simply moves underground, waiting for a question sincere enough to draw it back toward the surface. Picture the tree standing bare through winter, appearing from a distance like something finished, without depth. Beneath the surface, unseen, the roots continue widening patiently in the dark. Is the discomfort of that pause when someone finally faces an honest question about their own desire? Truly emptiness? Or is it simply the visible surface of something long overdue finally beginning to stir? This is the turn worth making gently here. The hesitation this question produces is not a weakness to notice in someone else, nor a failure to notice in yourself. It may be the earliest visible sign of something Jung called individuation, the slow, uneven process of reconnecting with a self that exists beneath years of practiced, safer answers. Individuation, at this stage, rarely feels graceful while it is happening. It tends to feel at first like exposure. Only later does it begin to feel like clarity. So what do you do in that pause, whether it belongs to someone else or to yourself? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you, capable of noticing hesitation, without immediately rushing to fill it, explain it away, or retreat back into a safer, more rehearsed answer. Not the part of you that quickly changes the subject once discomfort surfaces. The part that can simply notice, calmly. This question touched something real, and the silence following it deserves space rather than rescue. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that very little disturbs a person as deeply as their own judgments about what they are permitted to want. Can you sit with someone's pause, or your own, without rushing to resolve it too quickly? Can you let an honest silence remain honest, rather than filling it with the first safe answer available? And here is something worth noticing. If you look honestly, this exact hesitation has likely surfaced before, in other conversations, at other points in your life, whenever a question came close enough to something you had quietly stopped allowing yourself to want. Why does life seem to offer this same test again and again, in slightly different forms, until it is finally met honestly, rather than deflected once more? Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us tends to reappear in our lives as pattern the same unanswered question, returning in new conversations, new relationships, new quiet moments of reflection, until it is finally faced directly. Perhaps this is not simply about the person hesitating in front of you. Perhaps it is the newest version of an older question. When did you first learn to want only what seemed safe enough to survive disappointment? And are you finally ready to want more honestly than that? Viktor Frankl believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists narrow, but entirely their own. You cannot control the hesitation this question produces in someone else, but the space between noticing your own hesitation and finally answering honestly, even if only to yourself, that space belongs entirely to you. So what does honesty, in response to a question like this, actually look like in practice? Not something dramatic, not a single sweeping declaration that changes an entire life overnight. It might look like admitting, quietly, that you want something you have long dismissed as unrealistic, without needing anyone else's permission to want it. It might look like sitting with the discomfort of an honest answer, rather than retreating into a safer, more socially acceptable one. It might look like choosing an uncertain truth over a comfortable, well-rehearsed evasion. It might look like allowing yourself, for the first time in years, to answer the question without immediately calculating whether the answer sounds impressive. None of this arrives with fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid facing an uncomfortable truth about their own desires, and if that is true, then simply sitting honestly with a pause, rather than rushing to escape it, may already be a significant act of courage. Return, for a moment, to the mask, and that single seam it was never quite built to withstand. Imagine pressing against it gently now, not to break it apart, not to expose anyone unkindly, but simply to see, honestly, what has been waiting quietly underneath it all along. Does that make the mask something to fear? Or does it simply mean you finally know exactly where the truth has been hiding? And so we return to the question beneath every rehearsed answer, every practiced certainty, every conversation that moves smoothly because it never asks for anything real. What actually remains of a person once the safe, rehearsed version of their wanting is finally set aside? What remains of you in that very same pause? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps the truest self was never hidden as deeply as it seemed. Perhaps it was only ever waiting for one honest question, sincere enough to finally be asked. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Write it in the comments below, and let that pause, wherever it lives in you, finally speak.